Smoke curled into the night sky, thick and black, as flames devoured the house I had called home for over 40 years. The heat pressed against my face even from the street, and I could feel the walls crumbling inside. Everything I had built, memories, furniture, photographs, keepsakes, vanished in minutes. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my chest tight with a mix of shock and disbelief. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I had nowhere to go. My mind immediately turned to my son's house. He had always been a good man, sensible and cautious, and I hoped, just hoped, that he would open the door to me. But when I arrived, my hope crumbled instantly. I knocked, and then knocked again, my voice trembling as I called out his name. The door opened just a crack. There she was, my daughter-in-law standing like a barrier. She glared at me with an expression that cut deeper than the fire that had just consumed my home. "I don't want my house to smell like old people," she spat. "Get out." Her words hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, but nothing came. I felt my knees weaken, my pride battered. My son appeared behind her, his face tight, caught between his wife's sharp words and his father's desperate gaze. But he didn't step forward. He didn't say a word. I was left on the doorstep, staring at a life I no longer had, feeling more helpless than I had in years. Memories of my home, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the evenings spent with family, flooded my mind. And now it was gone, replaced by ashes and smoke, and by the coldness of my own family's rejection. I sank to the steps, gripping my phone like it was a lifeline. Then, almost instinctively, I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. A friend from my youth, someone who had always been there in the shadows, quietly watching over me. Few people knew I could reach him. Fewer still knew he was a billionaire. The seconds dragged. Each tick of the clock felt like an hour. My heart pounded as I waited, uncertain if he would even answer. The street was quiet except for the occasional sound of a car passing by, the glow of the fire reflected in every window. I closed my eyes, imagining what he might say, hoping for a lifeline in this darkness. Then a low rumble broke the silence. I opened my eyes, and at the end of the street, gleaming under the orange glow of the fire, a Rolls-Royce rolled to a stop. My breath caught. I couldn't believe how fast it had arrived. The driver stepped out, opening the door, and from it emerged a figure I hadn't seen in years. My friend. He walked toward me, calm and composed, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that made my stomach twist. He stopped in front of me, leaned close, and whispered 3 words that made the world feel like it shifted. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The fire, the rejection, the hopelessness, it all seemed to wait silently, as if holding its breath with me. For the first time in hours, I felt a spark of hope. But what did he mean? What was he planning? My heart raced, unsure whether relief or shock would come first. Before we continue, please comment where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting revenge stories. The Rolls-Royce gleamed under the dim streetlights, its polished black surface reflecting the orange glow from the fire behind me. I stared, hardly daring to breathe. My old friend, my billionaire friend, the one few people knew about, stood in front of me, calm, collected, like nothing in the world could shake him. There was something magnetic about him, something that made you trust him immediately, even in the strangest situations. He put a hand on my shoulder, firm but reassuring. "It's going to be all right," he whispered, the 3 words that had stopped my world. But I didn't understand them yet. How could he possibly make things all right? My house was gone, my family had turned me away, and I felt smaller than I had in years. We walked a few steps away from the fire, and he studied the charred remains silently, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to me and smiled, the kind of smile that hid decades of experience, power, and secrets. "You've always been there for the people who mattered. Now it's time someone is there for you." I wanted to ask how he could possibly help in this mess, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I followed him to the car. He opened the passenger door for me. The interior was cool, luxurious, and immaculate. It felt impossible that such wealth could exist, even in someone I had known for years. I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about influence, about knowing how to move the world quietly and decisively. As the car rolled away from the scene, he began to tell me small stories of our shared past, memories I had almost forgotten. The nights we stayed up talking about dreams, the promises we made to each other when life was uncertain, the times we saved each other from trouble nobody else knew about. Each story reminded me why I had called him in the first place. He wasn't just rich, he was loyal. Then he paused, his gaze sharp and intense. Your family doesn't understand your value, but we can change that, step by step. His words carried weight, as if every word had been tested in strategy and experience. My heart pounded. Was he talking about revenge, restoration, or something else entirely? The rest of the ride was quiet, but the silence was heavy, filled with unspoken possibilities. Every time I looked at him, I could see the hint of a plan forming behind his calm exterior. I didn't know what it was yet, but I felt a strange mixture of hope and fear. Hope, because I finally had someone powerful on my side. Fear, because I had no idea what that side might do to make things right. By the time we stopped, I felt a strange energy coursing through me. For the first time since the fire, I felt alive. Not just surviving, but ready to act. But how could we even begin? Could a single visit from someone so influential really change everything? My mind raced, trying to imagine the possibilities, and yet, as he turned to me, calm and confident as ever, I knew one thing. My life was about to change, whether I was ready or not. The only question was how, and what my family would feel when it did. The morning after the fire, I woke up in a small, quiet hotel room the billionaire had arranged. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished leather, a stark contrast to the smoke and ashes that still haunted me. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my eyes, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. My house was gone. My family had turned me away. And yet, somehow I felt a spark of possibility. He sat across from me, calm, sipping a glass of water as if nothing in the world could rattle him. "You've been wronged," he said softly, "but you're not finished. Not by a long shot." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask how, but he shook his head slightly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "All in good time. First, we need to understand the battlefield." Over the next hour, he explained what he meant. Not in detail, but enough to make it clear that he had already started moving pieces I couldn't even see. Calls had been made, quiet inquiries, preparations behind the scenes, all intended to give me leverage, dignity, and control over the situation I had felt helpless in just a day before. I listened, partly in awe and partly in disbelief. I had never imagined a world where someone could act so decisively, silently, yet so effectively. And yet, every word he spoke resonated, every suggestion, every hint seemed like a step toward regaining not just my house, or what was left of my life, but my sense of worth. As he talked, I realized how much I had relied on pride alone for decades. I had thought I could handle anything, that I could survive alone. But now, seeing the scales tip in my favor, I understood something vital. Strength didn't just come from doing everything yourself. Sometimes it came from having the right allies, people who could move the world quietly and give you a chance to rise. But even with his help, fear lingered. How would my son react? Would my daughter-in-law escalate her cruelty? Could I truly stand my ground without losing what little remained of my relationship with my family? These questions gnawed at me, filling the room with a tension I couldn't shake. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, almost conspiratorial. "You need patience," he said. "Hasty moves will ruin everything. But measured, careful steps, those can change everything." He outlined the first step, though not in full. It was enough to give me a sense of direction, small, deliberate actions to assert my presence and dignity. While he worked in the background, I left the hotel feeling a mixture of fear and determination. The world outside felt sharper, more dangerous, but also more hopeful. For the first time since the fire, I felt the stirrings of confidence. I could see the path forming, hazy but real, leading back to my family, back to my life, and toward a reckoning my daughter-in-law would never forget. Every step I took now was guided by his quiet strategy, yet I had to act as if nothing had changed. Every glance, every word, every movement had to be precise. One misstep, and the fragile balance could shatter. But deep down, I felt something I hadn't in years: the power to fight back. Not with anger, not with force, but with cleverness, patience, and a little help from someone who had always been there, unseen. The following week, I returned to the neighborhood, this time not as a desperate father seeking shelter, but with a quiet determination that surprised even me. The ashes of my old home still smoldered in my mind, but I had a plan. Guided by the calm, calculating presence of my billionaire friend, though he remained unseen, orchestrating things from the shadows, I approached my son's house slowly, pretending to be casual, like I had simply come to visit. My daughter-in-law was in the garden, tending to flowers, her sharp expression softening just slightly as she noticed me. I could feel the tension thick in the air, heavy and prickly. I greeted her calmly, nodding politely, saying nothing about the fire or her cruel words. She blinked, momentarily caught off guard by my composure. Inside, my son seemed conflicted. He lingered in the doorway, torn between loyalty to his wife and the instincts that had always made him care for me. He spoke to me in clipped sentences, careful not to take sides openly, yet I could sense his unease. Every word, every glance felt like a subtle battle, a test of patience and courage. I spent the afternoon moving deliberately. Small gestures of engagement, smiling when my grandson ran past, commenting gently on the new decorations in the living room, even offering help in the kitchen. Nothing overt, nothing confrontational. Yet each action carried weight, a quiet assertion of presence. I noticed her watching, her confident exterior flickering ever so slightly. Meanwhile, unseen forces were at work. The billionaire friend had arranged subtle behind-the-scenes changes. Neighbors who had once turned a blind eye now offered quiet support. Small favors that made my steps lighter, whispers of respect spreading quietly. It was invisible to anyone except me. Yet I felt it in the atmosphere, in the way doors opened a little wider, in the way people looked at me. By evening, the tension had reached a palpable pitch. My daughter-in-law's eyes betrayed the first hints of worry. She was realizing, without understanding fully, that I was no longer the man she could dismiss. My son's silence spoke volumes, his mind clearly weighing the growing shift in family dynamics. And I, for the first time in days, felt a sense of control. Not complete control, but enough to know the tide had begun to turn. We ended the day with a meal that was strained yet civil. Conversation flowed carefully, each sentence measured, each laugh deliberate. And though the atmosphere was still tense, a subtle change had begun. One that would ripple through every interaction from this point forward. As I left that evening, the sun setting behind the rooftops, I felt a mixture of pride and anticipation. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the knowledge that the next moves could tip everything into a new reality. My daughter-in-law was beginning to sense that the man she had mocked was no longer powerless, and my son was starting to see that loyalty could not be dictated by anyone but himself. The calm before the storm stretched out before me. I knew the billionaire friend's plan was only just beginning, and the world I thought I had lost could be reshaped. Every step forward carried risk, every smile held weight, and every glance became a silent negotiation of power, patience, and cunning. The morning air was crisp as I stepped toward my son's house, but this time I felt different. The fear that had gripped me when I first stood on the doorstep after the fire was gone. Confidence replaced it. Not arrogance, but a quiet certainty born from the careful guidance of my old friend. I had waited, observed, and acted deliberately. Today, the final pieces of the plan would fall into place. Inside, my daughter-in-law was bustling around the house, unaware that everything had shifted. She greeted me with her usual sharp tone, expecting the same timid compliance I had shown weeks ago. Instead, I smiled calmly, met her gaze firmly, and said nothing, letting my presence speak louder than words. The shift was immediate. She faltered slightly, caught off guard by my composure. My son appeared, eyes widening as he noticed the change. The tension in his shoulders softened, replaced by a mix of relief and surprise. For the first time, he truly saw me, not as an old man who had lost everything, but as someone who had endured, adapted, and reclaimed dignity. Then the quiet hum of an engine announced the arrival of the Rolls-Royce. My friend stepped out, as poised and enigmatic as ever. His presence alone carried authority. He didn't speak loudly or boast, he simply walked into the scene, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined my recent life. He handed me an envelope, simple yet heavy in significance. I opened it to find documents and gestures that secured my position, not just legally, but socially. Everything my family had once taken for granted or dismissed was now firmly in my control. Every move had been anticipated, every detail prepared. The daughter-in-law's confident exterior cracked. Her words stumbled, her tone softened. I didn't realize, she began, unsure how to navigate the sudden reversal of power. My son, too, struggled to find the right words, but his eyes betrayed understanding and remorse. He had seen the lengths I had gone to, the dignity I had regained, and the loyalty of a friend who had never abandoned me. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure that had eluded me since the fire. I spoke, my voice steady. I lost a house, yes, but I haven't lost who I am. And neither should any of you forget that respect and family are earned, not demanded. The room fell into a heavy, thoughtful silence. Then quietly, my son reached for my hand, an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond that still existed between us. My daughter-in-law looked down, ashamed but aware of the lesson she could no longer ignore. Outside, the Rolls-Royce waited silently, a reminder of the quiet power that had orchestrated this moment. My friend gave me a subtle nod. No words needed. Everything that had seemed hopeless was now shifting in my favor, not through anger or confrontation, but through patience, strategy, and loyalty. For the first time in weeks, I felt complete. The ashes of the past could not destroy me. I had faced humiliation, loss, and despair, and emerged not broken but stronger, dignity intact, relationships reshaped, and a subtle yet unmistakable power restored. And though the fire had taken my home, it had ignited something far greater. The realization that even in the darkest moments, resilience, courage, and the right ally could change everything. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories.